Welcome, everybody, and this is Release the Adventure, a podcast about adventuring and getting outside and being your best selves. I'm Brad, and this is...
And I'm Sean.
And today we have a really special guest that really inspired both me and Sean to get out and be active and kind of learn something different about ourselves. And he is Matt Fitzgerald. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah. So I am Matt Fitzgerald, coming at you from Oakdale, California. Stuck at home like everyone else these days, but still finding ways to release the adventure, as it were.
There you go. Awesome. Yeah, so tell us a little bit more about how you've been doing with all the virus stuff, because I'm sure a lot of people out there, and myself included, definitely, I've been struggling a lot with motivation and just trying to get out there and find new things to do. What have you been up to?
Yeah, so I've had a kind of an interesting experience because I got sick. Let's see. So I ran the Atlanta Marathon on March 1st, and so 5 days after I got home, I started to feel symptoms. So this is March 6th.
Oh wow.
Okay.
And I was never able to get tested, but I'm 99% sure, well, we'll call it 95, that it was COVID-19.
Wow, holy smoke.
Everything lined up, almost everything. I was never too feverish, but in any case, whatever it was, I've never been so sick for so long. So it was weird because, obviously it's like if you pay attention to the media or even you're on social media, it's all you hear about now. And right around the time it exploded, so it just becomes unavoidable. It changes all of our lives. I became, like I said, sicker than I've ever been in my life. So I felt like I was just deep inside it. It was a real drag. But it was also it just changed my whole perspective on what was going on, because I think a lot of people, everyone's feeling it, but not everyone's sick. So like a lot of the stuff I think maybe you were going through a few weeks ago, I'm going through now, like missing restaurants and stuff.
Yeah, you were definitely more preoccupied with other worries and struggles.
Yeah. Survival.
Just staying safe. Crazy.
I saw on your Twitter that you had ran 4 miles recently, so I thought, he must have been really sick from something, or he's recovering for something, and I didn't see that specifically, that you thought you had COVID, so that is news to me that you had that, and I'm really happy that you were able to recover, though. I mean, sounds like it was a really difficult process.
Yeah, it was. For me, the main things, and you hear this over and over, were dry cough and like the breathing restriction. And when you're very, very aerobically fit, you're going to experience that in a different way than someone who's sedentary would. But it was still a trip. So through parts of it, I wouldn't necessarily feel I was sick unless I tried to move. But I couldn't move. Like even climbing a flight of stairs, it was like a coin toss about whether I would faint at the top or not, because I just,
oh my God,
I wasn't I couldn't breathe right.
And that's no exaggeration on the whole fainting part.
Yeah, no, I did actually, keel over a few times, and then the cough was probably actually the worst of it. Like I coughed so violently, like so often, that I injured a bunch of ribs. And then you can imagine how painful coughing is after you injure ribs.
Yeah.
I was doing everything I could to suppress the coughs, and every now and then I would have to do something on the phone. I would tell people, I'm going to sound really weird. Like you're going to hear all these grunting noises. Like that's me trying to suppress coughs and then still feeling pain. Like I sounded like I had Tourette's syndrome or something, but I got through it. Man. Yeah, it was. And the other thing they say about this is like people will start to feel better and then they'll slide backward, which really messes with your morale. And I had that happened to me 3 times, right? I thought, because you're comparing it to, because everyone's had the flu before or cold.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, once I start to get better, I keep getting better. And that just wasn't,
Mhm.
that's not how this thing works. But yeah, I've come out the other side. And
Interesting.
so like, I totally feel it, like, because I coach athletes, a lot of whom are struggling with motivation right now. Like I couldn't be more motivated because I couldn't I couldn't do anything for a month. So I have to kind of hold myself back because I did lose a lot. You can't,
Right.
you have to be cognizant of that.
Yeah,
Well,
right.
I'm
COVID
glad you're back and
specifically.
healthy. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I'm glad you're
Thank you.
back, at
Yeah.
least
Yep.
roughly.
Yeah. I ran 20 miles yesterday. So like
Oh.
it's actually a bit of an interesting experiment, in what, exercise physiologists would call detraining. Because I really was at peak fitness when I got sick. And then, clearly, I just look at my online training log. I'm like, oh my God, this is carnage. Like, and then you just
Mhm.
want to, like, for me, it's like a bit of a, because I'm very experienced and I do have knowledge of endurance training. So I want to sort of challenge myself to see how quickly I can get it back. And yeah, that's a lot about hard work, but it's also about being smart and disciplined. And like, I really want to challenge myself to see if I can pull it off. A lot of, all of these normal race events have been canceled. So they're doing a lot of virtual races. And I signed up for a virtual
Mhm.
marathon on May 17th. And like I know I won't be where I was at the Atlanta Marathon, which is where I think I picked up the bug. But I just want to. It's almost like a curiosity thing. It's like, well, how far back can I get in that limited time?
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely. Huh.
It's a super interesting concept.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um,
In your book, the 80/20, there was a good section of the book about what to do when you're feeling the different types of flat days, and I can just imagine this is the worst quote unquote flat day you've ever experienced. It was like a flat month, you could say. So, um, getting back to that peak fitness level must have been challenging.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm most certainly not there yet. But you're
For
right.
sure.
Like I'm trying to walk the talk. Like I am an athlete myself. I write about endurance sports. I coach athletes, but I also do the stuff, and
Hmm.
I do practice what I preach. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's funny. Like when you're first starting off, as long as you aren't over aggressive, yeah, like you feel terrible, like maybe the first few days, but then actually you start to improve. You're almost like a beginner again. Like you improve very
Mm-hmm.
quickly, and there's like a little honeymoon phase. And I've actually just come out the other side of that, where I am starting to have flat days, and the work I've been doing is catching up with me. It's like the first plateau in that process, and it just helps to have been there before, and to kind of know it's coming, and to know what it is when it happens, and know what to do to come out the other side of it. And forcing it is not what you do.
Right. For sure.
yeah. Well, Matt, can you just tell us a little bit about some of the books you've read, some of your background, kind of, I guess, what your life's been, that type of thing,
Sure.
that have got you into running and all that kind of game?
Yeah. I grew up mostly in New Hampshire. Family bounced around a bit when I was very young, but most of my childhood was in New Hampshire. And my dad was running marathons while I was growing up. I think I was 11, almost 12 when he did his first one. And, I looked up to my dad like a lot of boys do. And and it also, it just kind of, we're talking 1983 here, which is, running was booming, but it wasn't where it is today. But having my dad do what he was doing, it just made it seem like normal. So I started running around there. I was a soccer player, but like the running really helped me on the soccer field. I was terrible in terms of motor skills, but there's a lot of running in soccer, and I became like the kid who never got tired. Um, and but I ended up being a lot better at running than I was at soccer. So I went all in for the running, and got away from it. I was kind of supposed to run in college, didn't, but then got back into it. I also got the writing from my dad. My dad had published novels by the time I was, I don't know, well, sentient. And
Sure,
I
sure.
developed an interest in running when I was young, writing when I was young. And so I had these two passions, the writing and the running, and I didn't necessarily plan to put them together, but it worked out that way. After I moved to California in 1995, a couple of years after college, and just happened to get a job with a startup endurance sports magazine. And that relit the spark because I wasn't really in training or racing at the time, but it got me back into it and got me writing about the stuff. And slowly I kind of developed my own expertise, started coaching in 2001. Have written, I've had jobs with like Triathlete Magazine and Active.com and the Competitor Group, which did a bunch of endurance magazines. But now I'm just kind of a full-time independent operator writing books like the two that you have read and some others, and coaching. And I have a business called 80/20 Endurance, which is like just online training resources for runners and triathletes and cyclists and such. And I mean, there was no master plan here, but here I am, like really kind of loving the way things have turned out and feeling blessed and wanting to keep it going.
That's awesome.
Yeah, during the 80/20, early on in the book, I remember reading about your childhood, and you're saying when you were 11 or 12, you were so excited about running. You had started out with just a mile or two here or there, but by the time you were already 12, you were running 6, 7, 8 miles at such a young age. And that just kind of blows my mind because as someone who's always avoided running, Brad and I are both more so cyclists than we are runners.
Yep.
It just blows my mind, just as someone who just always saw running as a chore and just as a painful experience, I guess you could say, both mentally and physically. It just blows my mind that you're able to find that passion so early on.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, I don't have kids myself, so I gather things have changed a lot since I was growing up. But and it also may have been a function of where I grew up, which is very rural. But like pretty much every kid just had a lot of walking around fitness, is what I call it. Like kids were fit just from play and sports and lifestyle. And so, yeah, I remember, my dad ran the Boston Marathon in 1983. And I think it was like the next day, or it was either the next day or the day after I ran 6 miles. And that was just because that was my dad's standard route. Like he, obviously he did longer runs and marathon training, but like his bread and butter run was this 6 mile route. So I just went and did that and it was no problem. Just,
wow.
and not because I was like gifted. It was just because I had that walking around fitness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Matt, when I was reading, How Bad Do You Want It? Something that kind of popped in my head is, did you know, or at least think about when you started writing for that magazine, that you were going to become kind of a Matterfield expert when it comes to sports psychology?
Oh no, and honestly, I still don't consider myself an expert. I mean, I know what I know, but I'm not the guy who necessarily comes up with stuff. I view myself as kind of a conduit between the real experts and the masses.
Okay.
And that's both on the, because a lot of it stems from the fact that I am an athlete myself. I remain, I still do this stuff, and so I care very much about my own fitness and performance. And as someone who does care, I'm not just going to follow just anyone's advice, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even forget the training, just even on the diet side, like there's so much, it's coming at you from all angles, like do it this way, do it that way. And so you have to be, no matter who you are, if you care about how you feel and perform, you have to be selective. You have to choose, whose information to trust. And for myself, I trust good science, and equally, if not more so, like real world best practices, like what are
Yeah.
I want to do what the guy who won the race is doing,
Right.
as long as
Yeah.
he's not weird. Like, I want to do what most of the winners are doing.
Yeah.
As long as he's not
the
doing high
majority.
interval training.
Right. Yeah. Well, some of that, just no more than 20%, right?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
But, like,
only 20%.
yeah, so that's my role. It's like I try to get back to your question. Did I see myself, becoming an expert in endurance sports psychology? I guess the short answer is I'm not. But in the spirit of your question is like, yeah, I've developed a huge interest in it. I'm writing another book, sort of a sequel to How Bad You Want It now, on the same topic. But it's just partly because, like, as an athlete myself, I've learned just how important the mind is, and I have learned a lot just in trying to get better at the sport myself, get better results for the athletes I coach, and then by extension the folks I write for. Like what I tell them, I'm not just trying to sell books by delivering a certain message. It's because this is what I do myself. I really
Right.
believe in it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's good.
Okay.
So, in case anyone didn't know, Matt's upcoming book is called Running the Dream: One Summer Living, Training, and Racing with a Team, World-Class Runners Half My Age. So, Matt, what was your inspiration for even going out and going onto this journey to Flagstaff, Arizona, considering you were going out to train with Olympic hopefuls and other extremely elite runners that were running 120 plus miles per week? What was that journey like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of, well, it wasn't just sort of, it was fantasy fulfillment. I mean, they've done surveys, of like third grade boys, and like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And like 9 out of 10 want to be professional athletes.
Right.
And so, like, the dream, because I mean, what do you do when you're in the third grade? You play. Like, what are professional sports? It's like getting paid a lot of money to play. And so if you really develop a big passion for a particular sport, it's easy to have that fantasy. It's like, and not even necessarily like going pro or being sponsored, but just having the opportunity to take it all the way. I see this, in the running, like the endurance world, so many athletes. I mean, obviously only a very few have enough talent to take a shot at the Olympics, but passion is completely separate. Like, you can love running or cycling or triathlon just as much as the pros without having half their talent. And that was kind of me. Like, I had some talent, but even when I was in high school, I was one of the better runners in my state, but I knew then I wasn't going to the Olympics, but I loved it. And I would fantasize like, like how good could I be if I could just focus, and not necessarily for the rest of my life, but just for a time. So I was 46 years old when just kind of the stars aligned, and I actually decided to make it happen, and not just for myself, but like, very intentionally to write about it. And because obviously the opportunity that I created for myself is not something the masses can do. So I wanted to give others who may have at one point have just wondered, how far could I take this if I really had a chance to take it all the way, to allow them to live the journey vicariously through me. And that was the inspiration.
Yeah, kind of like you're saying a minute ago, being a conduit from the experts or the best in the field to the masses, even in a more physical point rather than, a writing or researching point.
Yeah, it was also, in a sense, like putting my money where my mouth was, because all the time I'm preaching to other athletes, like, do what the pros do, and obviously like scale it down. but
Sure.
It's like, these folks, like, they actually know what they're doing, because they've got so much riding on it. And so I wanted to sort of like put myself in the position to guinea pig. Like, does it really work? Like, I tell people it works, but if I'm actually doing everything the pros are doing, like training at high altitude, taking afternoon naps, getting the physical therapy, the massage, like, the coached strength workouts, like, the immaculate diet, like, all in. Like, can I actually get better at 46, having started running when I was 11? And spoiler alert, I did.
Yeah.
Well, something that I thought about just going over the story you just said, what type of mental fortitude, or as you said in How Bad Do You Want It, your fire walking concept, how did that go into when you were down in Flagstaff?
Yeah, I remember doing another podcast interview while I was there, like in the middle of it, and the guy doing the interview, he was a college runner, so like he was, I mean, he was a he was a better runner than I ever was, but his one of his first questions was like, man, the training must be just brutal, and I thought about it. I'm like, well, I guess it's hard, but it doesn't actually feel that hard because I'm enjoying it so much. And that was really the main thing for me, because, the thing about, especially, endurance sports is that, I mean, they're painful, like, I mean, there's no ball, there's no teammates, like, there's no scoring. Like, it's just, you're just out there trying to get to the finish line. And at some point it's going to start hurting a lot, if you're pushing it. And yeah, so they're tough sports, but I mean, there's still, and it's not even masochism. There's something that you can just love and enjoy. And so I just felt so lucky to be there. And I knew it was 13 weeks. It was one summer. That was all I got. And so my motivation level was so high that's the thing about it, is that a certain amount of suffering can feel two different ways depending on how bad you want it, right? Like, if you're suffering, just put a number on it, on a 100-point scale. If you're suffering at 92 can be your limit if you just don't want it that bad. But 92 can feel like a cakewalk if you want it bad enough to go to 100. And like, when I was in Flagstaff, I was willing to go to 100, and there were a few occasions when I did. But by and large, yeah, I worked my butt off, but because I was so into it, that was more salient in my experience. It was not how quote unquote brutal it was, as that other interviewer put it, but just how much I was enjoying the experience and the challenge.
That's amazing. That just sounds like a good time all around.
Yeah, it really was, because, I mean, running is not a big fan sport, but I am a fan of running. So, in addition to someone who does it, that first marathon my father did, the 1983 Boston Marathon, my two brothers and I, the whole family went down to watch my dad run, but we also got to see the pros. And, the legendary Joan Benoit, who went on to win the first gold medal, well, the first Olympic women's marathon, it was in Los Angeles. Joan Benoit, American, wins the gold. Well, I mean, she won that race in world record time. And I don't think I knew who Joan Benoit was the day before, but you're so impressionable at that age. And she was my hero. I mean, she was amazing. She was beating almost all the guys. I'm like, this is incredible. So like, I became a runner and a fan of running almost at the same time. And so that was a big part. And I get it. Like, not, most people who run 2 or 3 marathons a year can't name 5 pro runners, but I can. So that was definitely caught up with it. Like, I was on a team, the name of the team is Northern Arizona Elite. And there were about a dozen members, and, I knew who these people were before I got there. So, I mean, like, imagine, I don't know, like, you're like a guitar player, and you go to some kind of camp where the teachers are, Jimmy Page and Bruce Springsteen and, like Jack White. Like that's kind of what it was like. I might be exaggerating slightly, but only slightly.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even say slightly, because these people are the top of the top, and that's just an amazing thing to be able to, I guess, feed off their energy and I guess be a fanboy.
Yeah, but I mean the thing that makes it a little, and those who choose to read the book will see it. The thing that makes it, that just adds another dimension to it, is that I am twice their age.
Right.
I was 46 then. The oldest member of the team was 34. Most were in their 20s. The coach was 37, 9 years younger than me. Like everyone, like I saw, like, because I was all in, like, so I went to, physical therapist. I saw a sports psychologist. I did the regular, like, super painful, torturous, like, sports massages. Everyone, even all these ancillary people, were way younger than I was. And you might actually think that would make me feel old. It did the opposite. Like after, maybe I felt old, a little self-conscious at the beginning, but after 13 weeks, because you're not looking in the mirror all day, you're looking at your milieu, and everyone around me is super young. So I started to feel like I fit right in. Like I'm young again.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. This makes me think of kind of one of the Arthur boys type of situation.
Yes.
Where Arthur was running around New Zealand, and he was in his close to his 50s at that time, but he's attracting all these Olympic hopefuls, and everyone's following him around, and you were kind of inversely doing a very similar thing.
Yeah, that's a good parallel. Percy Cerruti as well. The Australian, because he and Arthur Lydiard were kind of contemporaries and rivals, and they both had similar stories where they were sort of the first coaching legends in running. It's funny, they both kind of came from that part of the world too, but yeah, they were both guys who kind of were late bloomers, who were walking the talk, just like I tried to do. But yeah, it was a little bit so there's a parallel, but it's also inverted, because it's funny, as someone who's written books, like I can sometimes go to a book signing, say, and sign a book for someone who will tell me I'm a huge fan, which is like always a pinch me moment. But when I was with this team of professional runners, I don't think a single one of them had read a single one of my books. They weren't looking at me as any kind of guru. They're just like, who's this old slow guy? So the parallel only goes so far.
Sure. Going into this training regimen with these guys half your age, Olympic hopefuls, what was your personal goals, and how were you able to keep up on those goals, and did they change over time?
Yeah, so so for the longest time, I had a goal of running under 2 hours and 40 minutes for the marathon, and I got really, really close at one point. Like, so my best time was 2:41 and change, but like I just wasn't satisfied with it. Like these numbers, they're completely arbitrary. They don't mean anything because it's not the Olympics. But that's kind of what makes humans just the awesome species we are, is that we just decide we want to go to the moon, and suddenly something that doesn't really matter, it's like, well, who really cares? Like, does life depend on it? No. But it's just something that makes humans, is that we set arbitrary goals and then we set our hearts on them. And it's really not about whether you achieve the goal or not. It's the journey that pursuing that goal sends you on. Like, you just experience life in a way you wouldn't if you didn't set your heart on goals that were just way beyond merely getting by. And so that was a 2:39 marathon was my Olympics. And I didn't quite get there. I got close, but I was very injury prone, so I could never just stay healthy long enough. I knew I could do it. Like I was certain I could do it. Even my times at shorter distances said that it was within my ability, but I didn't. And then suddenly, lo and behold, I'm 40 years old, 41, 42, and I start to slow down. But then, when I got to 45, 46, I kind of figured out how to stay healthy. And that sort of explains the timing of like why I did this when I did, is that I was healthy. And so when I went to Flagstaff, I had recently run a marathon and it was 2:49. So 8 minutes slower than my best, but I was also 9 years older. And that's as close as I had come to my best since I ran that time. So when I arrived in Flagstaff, the coach is like, well, I've never coached someone so slow. Like, what do I do with this guy? Like I had out, Flagstaff is at 7,000 feet. I had never trained at that altitude. So there were a lot of questions, and it was tough for Ben Rosario, the coach of the team, to kind of figure me out. And also I responded so well to the altitude and the training and the lifestyle that I became a moving target for me. And it took him a long time to figure me out. He would say, okay, run these times for a workout. And I would just blow them away. And I would tell him, I swear I wasn't working harder than you wanted me to. The times were too slow. So my goal was like, I secretly kind of wanted to get that 2:39 still, but quite honestly, the person in me who knows the science of the sport as well as I do believed that was impossible. Like I truly I'm not a pessimist, but I did not believe it was possible. So I don't know. I just wanted to, because I was writing about it, I wanted a happy ending. I was training for the Chicago Marathon, which I actually got to run as a pro. The agent of the team pulled some strings for me, which is a story unto itself. But again, spoiler alert, I ended up running 2:39 in Chicago at 46, 9 years after I had set my previous personal best. So that's amazing. If the question was amazing, like, does this pro approach to stuff work for mere mortals? Like the answer is an emphatic yes. At least, it's a case study, one guy.
Yeah. So for people incredible at home that don't know how fast a 2:39 would be, that's like an average of 6 minutes and 10 seconds per mile at that point. So
6:05.
Very, very, yeah. That's really awesome.
That's gnarly.
Well, it's funny. Because the coach Ben, he believes in basing goals for the marathon on a per mile pace, not the final time. He says people get it backwards when they want to break a round number, which is exactly what I wanted to do. He said, well, that's arbitrary. Like what you really want to know is like, what pace can you sustain? And on a flat course, like the Chicago Marathon, you just lock in, there are no hills.
Right.
So he told me, because he was the coach, even though he was 9 years younger than me, I was going to do what he told me to do. And he said, like, I want you to run 6:05 per mile until you can't. And my average pace ended up being, I think, 6:05.005 seconds per mile.
Nice.
I did what you said, coach.
That's great. While you were training in Flagstaff, were you able to kind of put your money where your mouth was and use the 80-20 training method? And were the other runners with you doing the same thing or something similar?
Well, that's just it. I'm not, so just, for those who don't know, like that 80-20 concept, because like business people know about an 80-20 rule, like this is a slightly different one that applies to endurance sports. So the idea is that's how the pros train, is they do approximately 80% of their training at low intensity, 20% at moderate to high intensity. That's not what most recreational, even competitive recreational endurance athletes do. They're more like 50-50. And it's not that they're doing a bunch of high intensity. They're caught in what I call the moderate intensity rut. So, I mean, like, I didn't just come up with this 80-20 concept. Scientists studied what the top endurance athletes were doing, not just in running, but in a variety of endurance disciplines. And they found this consistent pattern. And endurance athletes, if you go back in history, they've been doing it for a while, but if you go back 50, 60, 70, 80 years, that's not what they were doing. So it seems like this kind of evolutionary process of trial and error, there was a convergence. And trust me, like swimmers don't talk to runners, but they both do 80-20. So it can't be an accident that not only swimmers and runners do it, but also cyclists and triathletes and rowers and cross-country skiers. It's like apparently what works. Now, of course, a skeptic might say, well, what works if you have elite genes and you have 30 hours a week to train might not work if you're a mere mortal. But the prospective studies, the controlled studies on mere mortals that have been done have shown that actually 80-20 works for everyone, as far as we know. So when I got there to Flagstaff, I knew they were going to be doing 80-20. It's not, they don't do it consciously. Like they don't even measure it that way, but they are doing it. So I already knew that that's what I would be doing there. I would just be doing like the Northern Arizona elite flavor of 80-20. And it was a little different from like how I had trained myself for past marathons was a little different. It was still within kind of the 80-20 range, but there was like definitely more emphasis on moderate versus high intensity. And that worked really well for me. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't there to like I said, play the expert. Like I put myself in the hands of a coach I trusted, and I really did exactly what the pros did, just, scaled down to, my limitations. I couldn't run 120 miles a week without exploding into shards. But I got up to 91 miles, I think, in 1 week.
Wow.
And yeah, it was more or less an 80-20 approach.
So within those 91 miles a week, or when you started to get to those higher mileage, what did you use for coping skills that kind of got you through that wall and to where it was a little bit easier to get through the pain?
That's the thing is that, I remember I got to a point, I think it was 1 week out from the race, and it was my last long run, and it was just an easy 14 miler. So really nothing compared to what I've been doing the weeks before for a long run. And I remember like toward the end of that run thinking like, I know I'm going to run 2:39. Like, it's not that I'm confident. Like I knew, unless I just randomly sprained an ankle halfway through the race, like I knew it. Like I would have bet any amount of money. And it was just because I had never felt that good. Like I wasn't as young as I used to be. I couldn't necessarily even quite match the times I could hit in similar workouts before, but I had just never felt that dang good, at that point in my preparation for a marathon. And so, again, like just my enthusiasm for being there I almost didn't even think of it as coping. Like it's only when I look back on it in retrospect and see all the work I did, and I think, dang, like that's a lot of hard work, but it really didn't feel like it going through it. A, because I was motivated and enthusiastic, but B, just because like, the specific way, I mean, Ben Rosario knows what he's doing. Like, I am a good coach. He's a great coach. It was a lot of little things. Like I was taking care of my body, the massages and the physical therapy, and I lost 9 pounds that, I mean, I'm a skinny guy. I was a skinny guy before I even got there. Like I lost 9 pounds just from, the little dietary tweaks. So I felt like I was aging in reverse. And so like there were only a couple, a handful of runs. I mean, I did suffer a major injury actually halfway through, and I had to kind of start over. But aside from that, like I just felt pretty darn good almost all the time. Like even when I was doing the most challenging sessions, like they weren't overwhelming to me. Like I was working hard, but I wasn't out of my zone, like, or I was just fully prepared for
Okay.
the
Yeah.
challenge that I was being tasked with.
That's awesome. That's a great mentality to have and a good way to like when I'm listening to you, it just makes me be like, okay, now what can I do in my daily life to kind of adjust things to be a little bit more positive and I guess enjoy the little things as you get into the harder things?
Yeah, it was something that Ben said, the coach, really rang true to me. It was just somewhere in the process. I spent a lot of time with him. He told me, even though I'm not much, because he was 37 and not a heck of a lot older than some of the athletes he was coaching. He said, I tried to be the coach and not too much the buddy of the guys on the team. But it was a little like he told me before I came out there, when I asked him, hey, can I do this thing? He said, yes. He said, I'm going to treat you just like one of the gang. But in point of fact, I wasn't just one of the gang. I was older and slower. So I got a lot of time with Ben. And I remember him telling me at one point, uh, 6 weeks out from a marathon, everyone wants to be on that starting line. On race morning, only a few want to still be there. And it's those few who perform well, who knock it out of the park. And that just resonated with me. Like when you just want to be there, like when you genuinely in your heart want to be there, it's difference making. And I'm not saying that's absolutely controllable. Like motivation is very squishy. And it's affected by a lot of things. And I don't care who you are, like you will struggle with motivation at some point, but it is controllable to some degree. As a coach all the time, I encourage athletes like, hey, there are X's and O's to this sport. There are certain rules you have to follow to get good results, but there's also wiggle room. There's room to do things in a way that you just enjoy. Like if you could do A, B, or C, and they'll all give you equal results physically, but one of them is something you would enjoy more than, if it's A, you would enjoy more than B or C, and they're going to give you the same physical results, then do A. Make it as in like, it's not all about like coping and like putting up with suffering. It's also about having fun. Like, the person who, it's a false dichotomy. It's like, oh, either I work hard or I have fun. Like, no, like if you're motivated and you actually want to improve and perform, you'll get the best possible results if you're having the most fun. So use that wiggle room to be good to yourself, be nice to yourself, like pursue the sport in a way that makes it fun. So, so you want to be that guy who's on the starting line.
Yeah, for sure.
You just kind of answered a question that we've been thinking about, is how to help people that have something wrong with their bodies or a little bit are overweight, nagging injuries, scoliosis, depression, self-esteem, and that type of stuff, and like how to overcome those obstacles. And I think you just answered that for us with just trying to find that happy zone within all the hard stuff.
Yeah, totally. People can be a little too hard on themselves, and they'll think, oh well, I'm just not motivated for this. Okay, that's fine, but I'll bet you are motivated for something. In fact, I mean, sometimes you can flip it around immediately. Like I'm not motivated to run today can be, I'm motivated to rest today. I mean, seriously. I mean, if you do that every day, okay, you're going to get really out of shape. But I'm also, I'm quite serious about that. Like it's like just a little bit of, psychologists call it reframing, because everyone is always motivated for something. And if you genuinely want to achieve a certain health or fitness related goal. Like it's not at something like your spouse said, you're fat, you need to lose weight. Okay, well, that's not you being genuinely motivated. But if you have a goal that comes from inside you, then you're motivated for that. And just because you're not motivated to do it in the way, a personal trainer thinks you should do it, doesn't mean you couldn't be motivated to take a slightly different path toward that goal. And you need to allow yourself that freedom. Like, it's okay to have fun. Like, it's, there's more than one way to get there. And you like, the psychological part is every bit as important as the physical, and you need to attend to it and give yourself a degree of permission to have fun and not be miserable.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah,
great mentality. That hypes me up.
Right on.
Yeah, it's definitely a really freeing experience whenever anyone's starting a new project or whatever, and you're in it for yourself, and it's not for any sort of outside reasons, outside pressures. When you're truly 100% doing something for yourself, I think the motivation comes naturally rather than a boss trying to micromanage you, and it's something that's very freeing and inspirational.
Yes. I mean, I don't think there are many people out there, if any, who are incapable of being highly motivated for something, right? It's not like it's not like the motivation bone is just broken in a person. Like, you can just be not into doing whatever it is that you think you got to do. So it can become, sometimes you have to experiment a bit. You see this like with diet all the time. People who are overweight for a long time and they try different diets, and they lose a bunch of weight, but they just gain it right back, and then suddenly something clicks, right? And it's always about it's almost like a lock and key phenomenon. Like, it's like right approach, right time, and sometimes that can take a little experimentation, a little bit of just getting to know yourself. But too many people are looking for like the answer. That they want, they want a key that fits every lock, like a master key. And I don't think that really exists. And yes, that puts a little bit of onus on you, to experiment. But I think it's also freeing if you have the right mentality. It's like, guess what? There's no one answer for everyone, but there is an answer for everyone. You may get lucky and find it on day one, but you may have to play around a bit before you find the right fit.
Well, Matt, I had a question about one of the individuals that you went over in How Bad Do You Want It, and that was Willie.
Yes.
Willie Stewart.
Yes, one-arm Willie Stewart.
His story resonated with me a lot. Sean's a rugby player. I wrestled until my junior year of high school when I hurt my knee. So, like, just him being able to, and Sean, I don't know if I explained it fully, but he lost his hand working for his brother, who was a contractor doing roofing or some kind of construction, lost his hand, completely severed.
Mm-hmm.
And he went on to be one of the best rugby players for the same league, and went off to run marathons and was a triathlete as well.
Yep.
Something that I wondered, when you got to speak with him or when you were doing your research about him, what resonated with you? What spoke to you about him that was so amazing?
Well, I mean, Willie is like someone, as an interviewer, you ask one question and then 45 minutes later he's done answering and the interview's done. Like, but he just has a spark, and it's not hard to see. But he struggled for a long time. It just goes to show you, like, it doesn't matter who you are. And he didn't just lose his hand; he lost most of his arm. in that
Okay.
accident, and he was 18 years old, and that's rough. I mean, he was a very high level athlete, like state champion wrestler, and he struggled. I mean, he went into a very dark place, and it lasted for a period of time. But he had the wherewithal to climb out of it and actually, yeah, become a better athlete with one arm than he had ever been with two. But you see that in him. I mean, when you hear him talk about the dark period, you understand like why he was in that place. I mean, you put yourself in his shoes, right? What if exactly the same thing
Mhm.
happened to
Yeah.
me at the same age? It would have been so much. I mean, he even talks about, I mean, think about it. When you're 18, you're full of hormones. You're like, as a guy, you're all about
Yeah.
girls. And he just think about that one dimension of it. Like, he didn't think he would ever have a girlfriend again. Like, just that one, forget about the athletics. Like, that's tough. It's just so much to process. But yeah, he did come out the other side of it in a big way. And yeah, if you talk to him, you just see that he has a kind of a fire inside him, and so many people, who I love comeback stories, and that particular book is full of them. And you see that again and again in the people who achieve just amazing comebacks after terrible setbacks of one kind or another. Um, it's not all just it's you know it's not something that you can entirely achieve through therapy or reading a good self-help book. There has to be something inside you that you can access, to achieve a comeback like that. And that's part of the fun for me. Just like, I enjoy writing these books and inspiring people with them, but it's also just fun to do those interviews, actually, to get to
For
yeah
sure.
to get to interact with
That
those people and get to know them, because like, it's almost infectious, because you're not just, it's one thing to read that chapter and be like, that guy's awesome. It's another to actually know that guy, like to have his phone
Mhm.
number and
Yeah.
email address, and like be able to just feel that fire that he had inside him. But you see that it's recurrent again and again and again. The people who achieve the most remarkable comebacks, they have a spark.
Yeah, and I think one of my favorite concepts that you came up with, that you talked about, was with Suri Lundy and choking and letting go of the concept of I want to win no matter what. With okay, I'm just gonna go out and do a try and see how it goes and have a good time. Um, and the way that she transitioned from focusing so much on the win and then doing her stuff with Brett Sutton just hyped me up, because I was like, oh, I wish I could have spoke with her.
Right.
I wish I could have spoke with Brett Sutton, because they just seem like amazing people whose focus isn't about just to win, but it's to enjoy what you're doing as you get going.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little, it's so funny how, like, it's a little counterintuitive, because I coach recreational athletes, competitive recreational
Mm-hmm.
athletes, but I learn from elite athletes. And some of the qualities that maybe a non-athlete would expect to see in the elites and not in the more recreational ones, they're actually the opposite of that. Like, the serious recreational athletes are more likely to be a little uptight, and the
Huh.
elites are actually a little more likely to be kind of chill. And
Yeah.
Siri Lindley, she was not chill enough, and that's what
Yeah.
she had to learn. And that you see it again and again in like true champion athletes. It's a process focus. Like, yes, they absolutely want to win, but they set that goal and then they forget about it, and then they're all about the process. Like that's how you win. And if you don't have the genes to win, it's still how you get the most out of yourself. And that's the path that Siri went down, even though she was an elite athlete. Is, she became too caught up in, like, if I don't win, or I have to win to feel good about myself. Like, that's a dead end. That is a recipe for choking, because then you become, hyper self-conscious. Like, you see that it's become a cliche, but there's something to it when, maybe the Super Bowl is about to happen and you've got, beat reporters who are spending time with, team A and team B before the big game. And one of them might report, like, oh, team A, and maybe they're the ones that have been there before. They won it the year before or 2 years before. They're loose. They'll say, like, I was with the team, and they're like, their last practice, and they seemed very loose. And that's a good thing. Like, are they loose because they don't care? No, they're loose because they've stopped thinking. They're not thinking about winning. They're thinking about playing well.
Yeah.
And there's so much to that. Just being process focused and knowing you're good, whether you succeed or fail.
That's awesome.
For Brad and I, we're really big into mountain biking, and there's kind of a culture that kind of goes along with that kind of mindset where it's all about just getting out there and just sending it. And so that's something that's been able to help me in my life, because usually I'm a very hyper competitive person, and a lot of times I'm just thinking so much about this internal battle with myself, and I'm just beating myself up just because of these put downs and stuff like that. But when I'm actually thinking about the process and just doing it, that's something that's very empowering and can provide so much better results.
Yeah. It's not either or. Like, you can want to win, or you can want to achieve your best, and at the same time not hold that goal too tightly and just sort of forget about it and immerse yourself in the process. Because like truly, that is how you get the most out of yourself. And you hear it again and again and again. Like, if you talk to the people who have won gold medals, like, that is what they do. And again, like, it's a little bit surprising to to maybe even folks like you who think, like, oh no, you have to obsess on the result. Like, no, you don't. In fact, you shouldn't. Like, and it doesn't mean you have to let go of caring. You can care and then put it out of mind. There was an infomercial with some cooking implement where the guy's tagline was "Set it and forget it." Like, I can't remember what that was, what he was selling on that infomercial, but I love it because it applies to exactly the right attitude toward goals. Set it and then forget it and focus on the process.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Matt, is there anything else that you would like to talk about?
Well, yeah, I mean, thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about it a little bit. Check it out. That's great. And, I will say, just to come full circle, that, having gone through the illness I went through, like, having gone through the experience with those, just being on a team of professional runners in those 13 weeks of, fantasy fulfillment, I came home with a lot, and actually just being exposed to the mindset and the coping skills of those elite athletes helped me get through what kind of everyone's going through right now. Like, there's just a pro way of dealing with any kind of difficulty. It doesn't necessarily have to be the challenge of trying to get to the Olympics. It can be something like having COVID-19 or having lost your job because of a pandemic. So I think, there's something in the book for everyone. So you don't have to be like as fanatical a runner as I am to get something out of it.
Right. So for everyone out there that is interested, there's a plethora of information that Matt has written and stuff. But if you're particularly interested in his new book, Running the Dream, it's going to be coming out on May 5th. Is that correct, Matt?
Yeah, which happens to be my birthday.
Nice. Happy upcoming birthday.
Thank you.
Happy early birthday.
And can people pick these up at their local bookstores, or where
Well,
can they find it?
right now, they might some might be open.
Yeah.
But yeah, anywhere books are still sold, and I don't know about other people, but I'm reading more the way things are right now. But I'm just buying everything online. But yeah, it's a major publisher, so wherever you normally get your books, you can get this one.
Yeah, and as for in my opinion, awesome. If you guys can and you have a local independent bookstore, I would say hit them up and see if they can order the book for you if they don't have it in stock on day one, because I'm sure they would very, very much appreciate the business.
Amen.
I think Amazon's gonna be fine by the end of this, but I think your local bookstore could definitely use the help a lot more. So definitely see if they're.
Thank you for saying that. I should have myself. Yes, very much so.
Is there any other social media plugs that you have, Matt?
Yeah, so my personal website is mattfitzgerald.org. I'm more of a Twitter guy than an Instagram guy. I'm on both, but my Twitter handle is @MattFitWriter. I'm also on Facebook, but I've maxed out my friend limit there. So
gotcha.
Get on the waiting list, I guess.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Matt, so much for being with us. It's been a very enlightening hour, and it's been awesome to talk about your career and things that you've talked about in your books, because I'm a big fan. I really appreciate you in the way that you talk about psychology. I have a degree in psychology and sociology. So anytime that people start talking about social interaction and the way that the audience and group mentalities come together, I always get hyped, and I just really appreciate
I really enjoyed talking to you guys.
To us.
Yeah, thank you again so much, Matt. This was really a super wonderful and inspiring opportunity. So yeah, just thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and to everyone out there listening. I hope that you guys are inspired to go out there and try something new. And like Matt said, in all of his books, there's something to learn from everybody. So please go out there, check out Matt's books, and let us know what you think. Let Matt know what you gained from reading his books.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Brad, do you want to send us off?
Well, you guys know where to follow us. You know our things. Once again, we are Release the Adventure, and we're a podcast about getting outside and doing awesome things. Thank you guys so much for being here.